So good afternoon or good morning to our friends in the Northern Hemisphere. So welcome to the webinar on harnessing market and competitor intelligence for growth, which is hosted by SmartSat CRC and presented by Steve Rooney from Airbus Defence and Space. So I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional lands across Australia and the world, and we recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationships with the land. We acknowledge that they are of continuing importance to the traditional owners living today. So market intelligence is derived from the collection and analysis of data and insights and is key to informing strategic business decisions. Competitor intelligence helps reduce complacency, improve discipline and improve continuous business development. The challenge in today's fast-moving digital world is working out how best to manage this for your business needs. And that's the topic of today's presentation. So you'll be hearing from Steve Rooney over the next hour or so on this topic. And we have time at the end for live Q&A. And we've also, you're also welcome to ask questions throughout the presentation. So if you've got a question on a particular topic as it comes up, feel free to enter that into the chat function or raise your hand, and that's my preferred function if you'd like to raise your hand, and then you can ask the question directly to the presenters. So you can do that throughout the presentation or leave it till the end and we'll have time for Q&A, but we'd like this to be a fairly interactive session. So without further delay, I'd like to welcome Stephen Rooney from Airbus Defence and Space to commence the presentation. Over to you, Steve.
Thanks very much, Sarah, and good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Apologies, I'm not on video, I'm just on audio, so just a bit of a blockage on the corporate machine. But my colleague Manish Bhatt is here. You can see Manish there. So we will do this presentation between us, and because we've got we're pretty lucky in terms of time, no particular constraint on time, so it's a bit of a challenge for me because I'm used to rattling through things in the shortest possible time. So first of all, I'm going to slow down a bit, and then second of all, let's make it interactive. So as Sarah says, happy to take questions at any time. That'll do. So if we go to the first slide then, please, Maddie. Or rather the next slide. Okay, so, oh dear. Okay, so just a bit of background about me. I suppose that the important thing to say is that I've been part of strategy and market intelligence within Airbus Defence and Space, so that's 10 years now. And you know, we're a big corporate, you know, we're a big defence and space corporate, and you know, part of the bigger Airbus group. And then, you know, as corporates do, there's many layers and hierarchies within that. So we're part of the secure communications business unit, and we've got, you know, a small market intelligence strategy team, of which Manish and myself are a part. But then above us in connected intelligence, it's the next layer up, if you like, market intelligence and strategy team. And then moving up to Airbus Defence and Space, there's another one. I mean, it works, you know, we're all networked and it all works. But, you know, this is the big corporate experience. This is not necessarily, you know, your experience. It just depends, you know, and I think I'll cover this in a little bit more detail as we go through. You know, there's very, you know, different organisations in different life stages, different sizes, and it means that the themes. Sorry, I've got a dog barking here. You know, different focus for different organisations. Moving on to the next slide, please, Maddie. I think that introduces Manish.
Yes, can you hear me?
Manish. Yes, go Manish. If you can introduce yourself, I'll just remove this dog.
No worries. Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to virtually meet you all. So yeah, I'm working with Steve Rooney in the strategy and business intelligence team within Airbus Defence and Space Secure Communications Group. My background actually is a mix of product solutions, strategic marketing, as well as strategy and business intelligence experience across the IT industry, aerospace, and defense. So I've had the fortune to gain different experiences for American, European companies, for companies like Three.com, VMware, Gemalto, Thales, as well as for the last 12 years for Airbus Defence and Space. In addition, I'm also a mentor for the Chartered Institute of Marketing, as well as the University of Westminster, and I've recently commenced mentoring at the University of Sydney. So I specialize on a range of subject areas as a chartered marketer, and I'm also a part of the advisory board of the CMO Council. So off the back of today, I want to ensure that you're able to share some of these resources and best practice so that you're able to benefit from some of the best practice for market competitor intelligence. And then in future, also share some of the expertise areas around marketing, go-to-market strategies, innovation, entrepreneurship. So there'll be further supporting material to share, to educate as part of this journey of us collaborating together. If
Thanks,
we move to the next slide.
There we go. So yes, so getting into the slide presentation itself, I think a general point for these next few slides, I think what we wanted to say here is that we're stepping back a bit and we're presenting the high-level definitions of market intelligence, and then looking for the common ground with you in SmartSat CRC and with your organisations. And I think the thing that we definitely didn't want to do, we didn't want to present this is how we do it in Airbus Defence and Space Secure Communications, because that's not necessarily an appropriate model for your business. It might be, and we will actually later give a few examples of how we do certain things, and that might that might be appropriate, and it might not. We'll see. So we will give examples. But I think the first thing to do is to look for the common ground and take a step back. And I think in doing that, and you'll see as we go through, you need to sort of ask yourself the question, does this resonate with me and my business and where my business is and my particular business situation? So I think it's a bit of a pick and mix. So some of these things as we go through, you think, well, I'm not so sure I can. It's not a question of agreeing or disagreeing. It's whether it resonates with you or not. So it's, as I say, it's not doctrine. It's a pick and mix approach, I think, and that goes for these definitions here. But I think we can understand the first bit. That's fair enough. And I suppose a point I would make on that is, I think the collection of data, the source data, the things that you see and hear are not necessarily, I would say, no, they're not the market intelligence. They're just the raw inputs. The market intelligence is what you make of it as you analyze it and as you think about it. So I think that, there's raw data. I think that's an important point to make. And then what it helps you do, well, there's some examples here, and I think I'll cover this on the next slide a bit. But again, as I say, have a look through and have a think about what, whether that resonates with your business, and have a think about whether you've got examples of that. I think that's the other thing. And I think that last point is, there's a lot of information out there, and you ought to be scanning that world, that environment. That's certain. But how you organise for that and how you make most efficient and effective use of that is also a challenge, I think. And let's move it on. Let's move it on to the next slide. So, okay, again, if it's specifically about competitors, I mean, it's about customers and it's about competitors, and it's about geopolitics, and it's about the general business environment. But specifically here on competitors, yes, you need to sort of look to the horizon a little bit and look to the left and look to the right. So I would imagine that we in our business, we can we can name and we can identify our existing direct competitors. That's not a problem, and we'll see those in the sales cycle and the campaigns that we're running on a regular basis. That's fine. But yes, new competitors may enter the market. There's no doubt about that. But I think substitute products is interesting. Alternatives, I would describe it as. What are the alternatives to what you do? I suppose in satellite, in the world of satellite, I think that's particularly important. Satellite is one of a couple of ways, one of a few ways that you can provide a communications infrastructure, and it's not the only way by any stretch of the imagination. So I think in our world, always looking, always coming up against the alternative ways of doing it, and of course, the more common, the more terrestrial, the more regular ways of providing end-to-end communication. And actually, the more mainstream it is, the more mass market it is, the cheaper it is. So it's looking for the, in the world of satellite, it's looking for the niche. It's looking for the not the last resort, but it's looking for where satellite communications has an edge. And in government and military, particularly in deployed operations, it almost goes without saying. Let's move it on one more, I think. Okay, so again, in competitors, and again, this is why I say pick and mix, because some of this will resonate with you, some of it might not. So I would certainly say in terms of, on the bottom there, in terms of sales forecasting, I would say yes, sales forecasting, but also sales campaigns. I mean, absolutely, in our world, sales campaigns, and this is a particular focus of what we do in our team on some big campaigns. Obviously, JP912 Australia is one of those. There's one in the UK, there's one in Germany, and we're providing a constant feed of a news feed, we're calling it, but it's also a market intelligence feed. So we're scanning for we're scanning the various sources for up-to-date news on competitors and companies of interest. We're also deep diving on particular competitors and the proposition that we believe they can offer in a given campaign, and we're also providing specific background as you might call it, for particular particular instances. Manish, can you add anything on this slide here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So just to give you an idea of, so in terms of what we've seen, so if you look at within secure communications, I mean, we've seen, we're monitoring in excess of 150 different types of competitors across a range of areas, including satellite communications, including the world of IT, telecoms, cloud. So we've been monitoring a range of competitors across various campaigns, as well as also partnerships. So we've been trying to identify who are potential partners that we can potentially work with to enter a market, and at the same time, who are the SMEs, who are the small businesses, who are the startups, the disruptive, and also the emerging players. So Steve mentioned the emerging players. So for example, we've seen the likes of SpaceX, Amazon, the new space players, what is the potential impact, and from our perspective, one of the value add that we provide is, so in terms of evaluating performance, so trying to be able to create a benchmark that can provide multiple stakeholders a view of, this is how we're positioned, or this is how this partner can potentially add value. So to be able to identify competitor partner strengths, to identify value propositions, so compelling value propositions from key players in the market space, so that ultimately across our business and across your respective business, you're able to identify core strengths of yours as well as potential weaknesses. And also by scanning what's happening in the market, it's been a source of generating new ideas in terms of how best to capture innovation, identify new customers as you're expanding out into new markets, improving sales forecasting. So we're typically involved in terms of shaping the business direction in terms of in terms of the 5-year, the 10-year business plan, very much providing the insight on what's actually happening in the market to try and help inform those decisions, and most importantly, keeping key stakeholders focused. But the key to success is ensuring, obviously, regular update intelligence needs to be timely, and it needs to add value.
Thanks, Manish. And just to pick up on that last one, business planning. So yeah, market intelligence is a big input into the business planning process, or the strategic planning process, or strategy, call it what you will. I suppose that's the other side to our team and our job description is, I said it's strategy and market intelligence. So on the strategy side, without just to give you a flavor of it, within our business at the moment, there is what we're calling a strategy refresh. So there's, in our business cycle, I think the time is right, and the business is focused and engaged in asking the strategic planning questions, starting with where are we now, where do we want to go, how might we get there. It sounds a bit sort of school, but if you just boil it back down, or take it back up to that sort of level, just keep the questions agnostic and fundamental. But even within that, where are we now? I mean, that's big in terms of providing a market intelligence input. So that's another side to what we do. We probably won't cover it too much here, but again, thinking about your businesses, thinking about your planning, business planning, strategic planning, your strategy. Do you do it? Do you need to do it? When you do it, so if you need to do it, and when you do it, then looking at an audit or a snapshot of where you are now, and what environment are you in? What's your competitive environment? The whole market intelligence. It all comes into play. It all comes into play at that point, if that's what you're interested in, if that's what you're doing. Yeah, I'll leave it there. So moving on to the next slide, please, Madison. Okay, and again, I would say this is pick and mix. So have a think about reducing complacency and improving discipline, foster an acceptance of continuous change, etc., etc. Have a think about that and see whether that makes sense for you, or see whether there are other benefits that you can see. I mean, just an example from a previous company. There is a lot of information out there. There's I wouldn't say too much, but there's loads of information out there. How you organise for that, and how you plan for that, and how you make efficient and effective use for that is an interesting discussion point for your business and for our business. In a previous business that I was involved in, we had you can subscribe to a number of these news feeds, none of these specialist news feeds, and I think the example I'm thinking of was in the world of perhaps more mainstream telecom and wireless telecom at the time. And you find that most people within the business probably have a subscription or a regular bulletin, you know, coming through over their email. And what we had, I mean, this was a much smaller business, and what we had was a number of well-meaning individuals just putting around an all-user mail message, you know, with a story here or a story there or a news of the day. But it was duplication. At the very least, it was duplication. You know, at the very worst, it was overload. And you know, you might want to have a think about that. And you know, did you want to nominate one person to do that? Do you want to just say, well, look, let's not just be scattergunning here. Let's think about who's best placed to do that and who can provide a service, perhaps, and then everyone can get on with their day job and not spamming everybody. And at the same time, we can have you know, a regular news digest of what's important, and perhaps we can even store that somewhere, and perhaps we can even make that searchable. And I suppose, you know, that is, you know, again, going back to an example, our example, that's you know, we have news feed within the team. We do broadcast that out. We do a daily news feed. We do regular monthly news feeds. We do specific news feeds. We're not the only ones that do it. So from time to time, others do pop up. But I think we have it, at least for secure comms, we do have it under control, and we do have a methodology, and we are organized about it. And we're certainly not duplicating, and it's not, you know, we don't get these email storms, at least not as a rule. So that's just an example from our world about, you know, how you might think about organizing this stuff. Any more on this, Manish?
Yeah, just to add, so from our point of view, the biggest learnings that we've had is it's not only a case of to get the intelligence, and now we're in a situation where it's you know, collaborative intelligence. Intelligence can come from any area across our business, across our partner community, as well as a customer perspective. But the key is really providing that actionable, addressing the so what. So there is a new announcement of a new product. What is you know, so what does it mean, and what is our response? So to be able to have the collaborative approach, collaborative participation, and then that collectively allows you to then make and inform and educate the business when strategic moves are made.
Thanks, Manish. Next slide, please, Maddie. Okay, so moving on to moving on to what you need to know, and just to sort of amplify that point from Manish there, I would say that you know, most of the time, you know, you're constantly scanning. I mean, if you're doing it right, you are constantly scanning a competitive environment. You know, you're doing this on a regular basis, and you're bringing the information in. It is raw data, but you're trying to turn that into market intelligence. You're hopefully organizing it so you're efficient and effective, and you can store it, and you know, it's disseminated properly. Most of the time, I think this is just going to be scanning, and it's going to be of interest, and you know, it's good to know. But most of the time, that's, I would say, especially in our experience, that's all it is. But very occasionally, you know, something is going to crop up, and you're going to need to ask yourself, as Manish has just said, really, what does that mean for my business? And what am I going to do about it? So that's important, you know, that the business understands that this, you know, it's good to know, and it's good to be up to speed and aware of what's going on. From time to time, you're going to need to have a think. What is that, you know, and perhaps take decisive action and change. So yeah, it's you know, that's the important part of it. I think in our business, perhaps that occasionally comes out through, you know, it surfaces in terms of merger and acquisition. I think that's the one that gets executive senior management excited in our world. Hopefully it's something that we've had a clue about, had an idea about, that we've been able to monitor, or we've seen it coming. Not always, but if something's structural happens in our market, in our world, then what it's exactly that. What does that mean for our business, and what are we going to do about it, if indeed we can do anything about it? So that's perhaps an example from our world. Other than that, just looking at this slide, I think that's pretty standard. I think, yes, we'll probably leave that one there, I think, and come on to the next slide, please. So, yes, we're starting to get into where does this information come from. Just starting to here, and we've got some more slides on this. On this top row here, that top row is not all internal data, clearly. But I think the point to make is that you need to make sure that internally you're making best use of the information you already have that's already available. And I'm thinking about the world of sales, and I'm thinking about our world of secure communications, and how in a bigger organization, or at least in our organization, this is actually not as easy as you might think. But I think sales by product, in terms of sales, sales by product, sales by region, sales by customer, sales by product type, sales by application, any number of ways of crunching sales data, assuming there's some volume, in your sales, I suppose with us, again, it might be, we're a lot of the time we're after key programs and you can count them on one hand. So it doesn't always apply. But if you have some volume, if you have a portfolio, if you have, it's some either regional business or international business, there's a number of things you can do with the sales data you already have. And it's important to recognize that and actually follow through on that and make sure that that's analyzed and disseminated. I think the other one there, and this again is, I'm thinking about us in secure communications, but lost order analysis and understanding of lost orders. And again, not easy in our business, but it's information that's already there. Now this one might be in people's heads, unless people are writing things down, this might be in people's heads. But it does go into, obviously lost orders, that goes into what's the competition up to, and what are their propositions, and how did they beat us, and what should we do about it. So that's very important. Moving on to customers here on the second row. Yes, absolutely. I think again we'll come onto this in a later slide. And even on competition, competition and the competitor data. And this, I think, again, on a later slide, we'll show you how we do it. But on financials, and again, thinking about our own business, it's something that we do report, and it's something we do store. Now, some of our competitors, yes, it is that one, but we'll come on to that in a minute. Some of our competitors are actually publishing their numbers on they're publicly quoted companies. They're obliged to publish a full financial report every year on whatever stock exchange they're listed on. So that might be the US. So that might be a federal report for the US Securities and Exchange Commission. It might be for UK London Stock Exchange. It might be for another stock exchange. But the disclosure is quite comprehensive these days, and the discussion around their business and their business prospects and the risks, the discussion of risk is, as I say, quite comprehensive. It's if you've been tracking it for a number of years, the disclosure is getting the requirement for disclosure rather is getting more and more. Obviously, that's it's stock price sensitive. It's information for the market, so that the market can decide on the value of the company. So it's tied up with the investor community. But from our point of view, it's very useful information. I mean, profit and loss, that's one thing. Obviously, we'll track that and we'll train that and we'll provide a scorecard on that. Balance sheet is interesting, and that's not my strong point. But if we need it, we've got people in the finance, colleagues in finance that can help with that. It does come into play around merger and acquisition, that sort of information. And again, better qualified colleagues than me would look at that under that scenario. But there's a whole world of information on the big corporates. So say that's interesting for us in our world. Just it depends on your business and depends on where you are in your business cycle as to whether that's interesting. Moving down to limited companies, so not publicly quoted or not shares not traded but privately held, but nevertheless in the US, in Europe, and in UK there is a requirement for reporting. That used to be pretty basic, but again, tracking it over a number of years, it's sort of getting a little bit better, depending on what the company is. I think there's within some of these companies, I think there's an intent not to disclose, apart from what they have to disclose. But I think that's getting a bit better. And again, around the discussion of risk and business prospects, I think there's more data out there. Anything more before we move on, Manish?
Yeah, so from our point of view, especially in the financial aspect, we've been trying to focus on revenue growth, profitability, R&D spend, so to identify trends around investments in innovation, and to be able to use this data to create benchmarks that will allow us to gauge where different players are positioned in the market space. So all of this feeds into providing a picture about an organization and to be able to make some informed recommendations to the business.
Thanks, Manish. Okay, next slide, please, Maddie. Okay, so now getting onto sources and bringing this perhaps a bit closer to home. So really, we more or less here we have the Australia market scan for JP9102. So let's just pick on a few of these. So in terms of the higher level business backgrounds, so the Australian there, so a newspaper publication, but particularly looking for news articles around the geopolitics and around the defence sector and defence industry, and any stories obviously on the ADF, on the Australian Defence Force, and any of the companies that have got that sort of higher level news going out that the Australian is picking up on. But then going a bit more specialist, just in the defence world, Asia Pac Defence Reporter top left, and Defence Connect below it. So that's going to be General Armed Forces news and articles with an Asia Pac and Australia focus. So, and I think this is going around the world of press releases. The world of press releases and publications that pick them up. And again, with those two, but in addition to that, those two publications will run geopolitical type articles, and they will run opinion pieces. And then the challenge for us, I think, is so what? What does this mean for our business? Now, in particular, what does this mean for JP9102? So we've got this sort of constant a qualification, if you like. We're sort of constantly shortlisting or qualifying and saying, okay, how relevant? A relevance test, if you like. That's probably what I should have said. A relevance test to JP9102, and within JP9102, it's not just about the next gen sovereign satellite system in terms of the space segment and the ground system and the service delivery. It's also about the structural the structural industrial complex, you know, the Australian industrial content, the Australian industrial landscape, and the relevance of whatever this news article is to Australia. So, you know, there may well be something from Boeing on Loyal Wingman, and we may well think, well, all right, that's aero, that's not particularly related to SATCOM. But if it concerns the infrastructure in Australia that Boeing is laying down, then and the economic benefits of that to either the region or the country as a whole, then that is important because it's Australian industrial content, and therefore it is an important story, and it's an important factor in the whole JP 102 campaign. So that's an example of how we take it wider. I think another one is in geopolitics. If we think about the UK, Australia, US alliance and what that's doing, so a lot of the time we'll pick up stories there and we'll publish those. I suppose we're trying to demonstrate, hey, the partnership, the partners in progress of UK, Australia, but UK, US, Australia. So it's a sort of a Five Eyes type focus that we're trying to pick up on. But it's not the only one. There's alliances within Asia Pac that we need to be aware of as well. So yeah, and then Space Connect, again, that has an Asia Pac focus, but it's when you look at it for a number of, as we have for a couple of years, you realize they do pick up the stories from wherever, so they do pick up the same stories that Space News picks up, for example, and Space Intel reports and Sat News. So we scan those. I mean that's business as usual, scanning Space News and scanning Space Intel report and things like that. Space Intel report is a paywall. We're lucky enough to have a subscription to that. It's a shame actually, because the guy that runs that is very incisive, but he is behind a paywall. So hopefully that just gives you some examples there. But this is just on the news sources. So what we're showing here, that's not the only source by any means. And I think I suppose you can see in the top right that it's not just about SATCOM. Cyber is important. Security is important. Just to mention, as is cloud. As is cloud, most definitely a cloud, although we're not particularly showing it here. But if we move on one slide, I think, although it's not obvious here, I think we have now got a box marked social media, and of course this is important, and it's emerged, over the years as we've been tracking it. And Manish is, I think, a little bit hotter than me on this. So Manish, over to you for a few words.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the development of social media, now increasingly we've seen the likes of LinkedIn, Twitter, being very much key for companies to make corporate announcements, announcing new products, announcing partnerships, and very much having evangelists across the business for key players. So very much in a cost-effective manner, you're able to set up a reporting and tracking of key competitors, key players of the market, key individuals, executives within the target competitors, target partners, and also from an end user perspective. So all of a sudden you have a great medium now, and in particular in Australia, I see LinkedIn, highly adopted in terms of content, in terms of storytelling, in terms of as a cost-effective means to get announcements out and have evangelists across your respective business to go out and promote some of the success stories across the business. So encouraging evangelists across the business to use such platforms, and again, using the opportunity to share and spread intelligence, spread news, and also to do that in a cost-effective manner. So that's generating far more insights than some of the traditional media. So it's a case of how do you collectively capture, yes, there are the traditional sources that are out there, but very often, it's having the alerts set up and having key competitors and partners and end users that you want to monitor, having those on your radar and having the key handles that you're able to follow. So being able to use that in a cost-effective manner. Again, there is zero cost to, again, leveraging the LinkedIn, Twitter feeds. And another area that we've been increasingly using is what I call social media monitoring and social listening. So there are tools out there which are able to monitor key trends, key insights from a customer, partner, and a vendor perspective. So again, being able to call upon and use some of these tools. And for example, there was a tool called DigiMind that we were using to do social listening of, and we could specify specific alerts of what we wanted to monitor around defense, space, IT, cloud, and different types of companies. So there are social listening tools out there that can be used as well to provide alerts in addition to do it yourselves and having individuals using the existing channels. But these are some examples of the sources that we're using and some of the best practice as well.
Thanks, Manish. Thanks so much. And I'll just pick on a couple. So on the left-hand side, on that list on the left-hand side, just picking up on a couple of things which are perhaps interesting in our world. And on the bottom there, events. So I'm taking that to mean conferences and exhibitions. So usually there's a conference program and an exhibition in our experience. And this is something that the Airbus Defence and Space and Secure Comms has attends and invests in quite heavily and has done for a number of years. So question is, how do you get the most out of that, and how do you extract the information that you undoubtedly get? I mean, this is face-to-face after all. This is person-to-person. This could be side meetings. This could be side conversations. This could be keynote presentations. It could be, contacts made on a stand. It could be observations of a competitor on a competitor's exhibition stand, observation on a competitor's presentation. But it's all real time and it's all face to face. So how do you capture that? Now that's a challenge for us in our business and always has been. And if depending on where you are in your business and whether you invest in these events, whether you present, whether you exhibit, whether you just walk the floor, bringing it back to the business is important. Otherwise, as I sometimes say, you might as well stand underneath a shower and tear up $10 notes. You need to get the maximum return on your investment, and you're not getting it if you don't bring this information back. And again, it might be, what does this mean for our business and what are we going to do about it? But it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one for us. I suppose our methodology is certainly to capture and store the presentations that are made available. They don't always make them available, particularly the military ones. Sometimes they're just given. If Manish is in the audience, he'll be taking photographs of the screen. So there's a bit of that goes on. But yeah, capturing and storing the presentations. We have an archive of that, and I do personally sometimes go back to that. If somebody is asking for a particular digest, if you like, on a company or on a country or a particular armed forces, maybe Germany or maybe Romania comes to mind. Of somebody's asking me about Romanian armed forces recently, and I found that they had presented twice, if I remember rightly, for the Global Milsatcom conference and exhibition. So I was able to certainly pull up those presentations from the archive, have a look through. But then I added that, to that I added, you can see websites on the list here. So I think it was Wikipedia, Romanian Armed Forces, just to see what the size and scope was of the Romanian Armed Forces. Then, you can go further if you want and look at Romanian geopolitics and the economy, etc. of a given company. Take it wider. But yes, events. I just wanted to mention events, because that's a pain point in our world, but an important point as well. Websites just touched on there. I mean, that's really to you know, when you're looking to put company scorecards together and company profiles together, as indeed we do. Website is one of the first places you go. Depends on the company, obviously. If we were to think about somebody like Thales, whole load of information there. So obviously we go through that quite thoroughly. If it was a startup, I'm looking at a couple of startups in the world of laser communications, and you can see that it's just almost a placeholder. You know, it's a very early startup type website. It's just got the basic information. Some of the links don't always work. Sometimes the links go around in a loop. It's work in progress. You know, you can see that. You can almost see that the company is a work in progress. So it sort of depends on the company we're talking about as to how useful the website is. Company accounts and annual report we already talked about. I think on brochures and sales literature, I think probably not the high level stuff, because that's just marketing, and you should be able to get that from the website anyway. But if you want to know detailed product portfolio type information, if it's that sort of detail you want, then obviously you'd look at the data sheets and the brochures. And again, on the website, you might be well served. Again, I'm thinking of Thales. They're very good with their literature, but not always. Not always. So sometimes it's not as easy as you'd think. Okay, I think we've exhausted. Yeah, thanks. I think we've exhausted that one. We'll go on to the next slide. Okay, so up until now we were talking about open sources, I suppose, with the exception of Space Intel Report, which is a subscription. But now, if you do want, now we're going into paid research, and we're looking at the market analysts and the analyst reports that you can get. So starting with the regular publications. So these are specialist publications. That's the first thing to say. And let's have a look at some of the names here. So I'm thinking about Euroconsult. On the sort of middle left row there. I'm also thinking about, on the bottom, NSR, Northern Sky Research. I mean, that's the one that's closest to our world. I think those and Euroconsult, in terms of regular SATCOM market studies, which you subscribe to. So, it's an expensive subscription, is the bottom line. We're, Airbus Defence and Space. We're fortunate. Airbus Defence and Space does subscribe. Sometimes it gets challenged, but we are paid up, and therefore every year there's there's a number of market studies that come out, so we can go through them. We can provide a summary and a digest and some highlights. I mean, that's something that we do. These can run to 100 pages or so. So to provide a synopsis, a summary for the business at large or for executives is a function that we do. We've got an archive, so we can track these things. And I'm thinking with Euroconsult and NSR, they're both providing forecasts. So they're both providing 10-year forecasts, which is helpful. And we can challenge that sometimes, but we can also look at the direction of travel. And I think it gives us an independent voice, so it's not just Steve Rooney or Manish Bhatt saying, I think the trend is this, or I think the trend is that, or I think you're crazy to invest in this. I think, well, look, don't take my word for it. This is what Euroconsult is saying. This is what NSR is saying. But, it is a paid-for subscription. Going one step further, where a subscription or a particular market study is useful, but it's not quite giving you what you want. Both Euroconsult, NSR, and these others here will work with you and provide bespoke or specific market studies. They'll do that obviously on a paid-for basis. You'll scope the requirements together. You'll probably do a competitive tender and down select, and then you'll work with the chosen supplier, work through the process, work through the methodology, receive the report, and disseminate the report. And if you pay that much money, I think this must come under the category of what does this mean for our business and what are we going to do about it. I'm not sure. Even in the corporate world of Airbus, I don't think we commission this stuff without a purpose, without a purpose in mind. I think I'm not sure where the Aussie dollar is at the moment, but I think in US dollars, you can be looking at just below 100,000 for some of this stuff. So it's not to be taken lightly. What else can we say? I mean, Gartner is a well-known name, Frost and Sullivan. Janes is a subscription. It's also a database. It's something that I've used, or actually a colleague of mine has helped me use to get a bottom-up picture of armed forces capabilities for a given set of countries. And this is literally looking at the naval fleet, looking at troops on deployment, looking at land assets and aero assets, both manned and unmanned, and deriving an armed forces inventory of platforms and of people to some extent, but deployed troops is really what we're interested in. And then from that, deriving a communications requirement, and from that, deriving a SATCOM requirement, and that actually building that up into a bottom-up forecast, but all starting from, a sort of a top trumps game, if you like, of looking at not a long list, but a specific list of countries, and then looking at their armed forces capabilities, and then building that up, a big Excel spreadsheet, and then trying to do some crunching within that and make some assumptions and make a forecast going forward. So actually, that's a game we play sometimes. We've got Northern Sky and Euroconsult giving us a top-down, but then we've got our own check and a balance, if you like, which is more of a pragmatic bottom-up, just to test and provide another input in case we don't believe, what the analysts are saying. But certainly it's a sanity check. Let's put it like that. It's a sanity check. Manish, any more on this one?
Yeah, and just to add, so there's multiple reports, public reports which are published, but very often the key is to initially when you read that executive summary or overview or preview of a report. So very much looking at in terms of the timeline for when the research was conducted, because very often you might have had a report where the study took place 2 or 3 years back. So very often with paid reports, being very careful in terms of the insights, the timeliness, as well as the insights that you potentially may want from reports. So if it's insights on the IT industry, for example, the likes of Gartner or IDC, very expensive reports. So being able to gauge the synopsis or contents to sort of try and ascertain, in terms of, is that really going to add value if I'm going to pay for a specific report? So the point of note with, again, multiple sources, we've tried to list some of the more, in terms of credible sources that we've had experiences of working with, but very much, again, just, looking for value for money and looking for intelligence, additional paid research that can add value to your business and support you with your growth aspirations in particular.
Thanks, Manish. And if you do go down this road, I would say spend the time on requirement specification and scope. Have a good think about that, because if that needs to be right, that's the first thing. Otherwise, you won't get what you want. And I've seen two things drop out of that. I've seen the responses from you shortlist or have an idea of who you could put that requirement out to. I won't name names, but let's say there's 3 or 4. That's probably what you would do, and then you'll get the responses back, and you'll go through and you'll shortlist and perhaps follow up with follow-up questions, and then shortlist. And obviously, you'll get a quote at that point, you get a price at that point, so obviously that's a big factor. But you might get a sense at the the responses you get are playing back, you know, your requirements. I mean, that's natural enough. You know, they need to, you know, understand your requirements, and then they need to say, this is how we would approach it. So there's going to be an element of playing back what you said in the first place. So, you know, you better make sure that what you scoped and what you said and what your requirements were is comprehensive, is well thought through, and is actually what you want, because it will get played back to you. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, if you're quite clear about what it is that you want. I've had a situation where someone's come back and said, actually, you know what, I've had to think about what you're asking for, and it's not something we can help you with. And that was honest, and that saves a lot of messing about as well. And I did appreciate that, you know. So what I was asking for, they couldn't help me with. So it's either what I was asking for wasn't reasonable or wasn't doable, or I should move on to asking another couple of people. And I think in that particular case, if I remember rightly, we didn't go forward with it because the other responses we got they fell a little bit short on the credibility, in terms of credibility, so we didn't actually go forward on that. But yes, that's enough on that. So thank you, Madison. We got the next slide up. So again, from our world, just a couple of best practice examples here. If we just go back one. So okay, so on the left-hand side, we're showing a company scorecard. So I'm not sure how well that's coming through, but it does. That scorecard is just looking at the key, the highlights, the at a glance, as it says there, at a glance, and then there's going to be the size of the company, when the company was formed, the CEO, the market cap, number of employees, perhaps something about where they are in the world, their offices in the world. Then below that, there'll be 1, 2, 3, at least 3 years financials, possibly a change trend. It's going to be P&L. I'm going from memory here because I can't see it, but it's going to be P&L. I think it's good, revenue, EBIT, that kind of thing. Some segmentation, if we can do it, on the top right there. So top right of the left-hand side, if you see what I mean. And then some perceived strategy notes. But that'll be page one. That'll be page one of a short pack on a given competitor. And then the rest of the pack, it depends what the task is. You know, there might be a context. So if it was something like information security, I mean, if it was SATCOM, that's fine, you know. But even there, you know, are we talking about the ground system? Are we talking about service delivery? Are we talking about the satellite constellation? Because that would make a difference. But I mean, Manage was involved with one on information security. So, you know, behind the at a glance page, you know, there was a different, you know, it went off in a different direction. But again, you know, summarizing that particular company's capability in this instance in terms of information security. Moving to the right-hand side, we're getting more specific. So I did say, you know, we talked about brochures, talked about data sheets, talked about company websites and what they can tell you about a product portfolio. So this is an example about an aero product portfolio from Thales in this instance. So that's just, there's some vital signs on a product range of airborne or aircraft mounted SATCOM antenna. Which is, Thales is very good for that. I would say they're quite helpful in that regard. It's not always the case, but you know, for that particular task, I would imagine that one was put together, if not exclusively, then with a certain emphasis on our product manager or SATCOM systems type organization internally. So I think our audience for that, you know, obviously that's of not particular interest to senior management. You know, that's more for product management, I would say, and they were definitely interested in that. So again, tailoring it depending on what the context is and what the audience is. So any more on that, Manish?
Yeah, just to add, and we'll share some examples in the follow-up best practice document, whereby it's how do we cater for, you know, the needs of senior management with that top level overview, the top level summary as described but then how do you then address the in terms of the sales teams that need specific insights in terms of competitor value propositions, in terms of specific products or solutions, in terms of going down to a detailed level. So now the key is a lot of this we've been able to use open sources, what's out there in the public domain. So again, in a rapid manner, what are you able to generate and create using existing sources, using also your customer and also partner network to identify and plug some of the gaps. So very much in terms of we're able to share some of the best practices in terms of places to go to for insights to then create these types of value-added intelligence, and ultimately it's about creating actionable intelligence that can add value to the business and to key stakeholders. And the key is understanding the limited life of intelligence. So to make sure that this is continuously updated, it is shared. So in the example of what we built up, so we've developed a SharePoint community site whereby we've organized intelligence by markets, by competitors, by customers, so that again intelligence is shared, and it's a collaborative process which adds value, and timeliness of updates is absolutely key and vital over here.
Thanks very much, Manish. So I think if we go to the last slide, I think that we've reached the end. So that's just our contact details there. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I think we've run to just over an hour, but I hope it was useful, and I'll hand back to Sarah.
Great, thank you, Steve and Manish. That was very insightful. So I'll open it up to questions and just pause for a moment. Let me check the chat. So I have a question while we wait for others to either get the courage to put their hand up or typing away on the chat. And my question is really around, so on a day-to-day basis, so implementing this sort of activity, is that something that you would expect a company to have a dedicated resource to undertake that, or is it more along the lines of ad hoc, and it's really more about that process being ingrained in staff members, so they're continually looking out for that information, and it's a process over time rather than an event that takes place in terms of gathering this market intelligence? I guess I'm trying to set the scenes to, if I was wanting to do this in my organisation, should I be employing someone to do it, or adding it to a number of people's position description to continually maintain that sort of market intelligence?
You go first, Manish. What do you think about that?
Absolutely, yeah. So we've actually gone through this challenge and journey. So initially we've had to adopt a collaborative approach, collaborating with key members of the business, because in terms of the sheer value of those that are closest to the customers, to the partners, to the market space. So, and obviously with time and with success, we've been able to have dedicated resource specifically and teams. But the key to our approach has been a collaborative effort to get senior management commitment. So to have management buy-in in terms of that strategic value of intelligence, to be able to support your growth efforts, and on a daily basis. If I give you some examples of, so whether it's bid management, whether it's sales, or the product teams, they are seeing intelligence, they're sharing this in a collaborative manner, and all of a sudden, collectively as a business, we're all being proactive rather than a individual, or because obviously by having a individual, obviously, you don't want to have obviously, in terms of if someone's on leave, so to have that fallback by having a collaborative team approach and identifying key stakeholders early, creating like a virtual team initially, and and bringing that best practice into your respective organization.
Thanks, Manish. And I think, yeah, so my input on that would be, obviously you've got to recognise and be aware of, and it depends on where you are as a business in your business life, in your life cycle and your life stage. So, you know, anywhere from startup or proprietor through to small enterprise, through to medium enterprise, through to something a bit more corporate. You know, you may or may not have the luxury of, you know, a headcount or headcount, either individually or collectively to do this. Obviously, it's an overhead. If I think back to our business, I think and other businesses I've been involved with, I think there's two ways that market intelligence can start to emerge. One, if you have a strategy person, or if you have invested in either somebody or a team, or if you regularly do strategy, you know, if that's a thing for your business, then even if it's just, you know, a conversation down the pub amongst the owners, if you're doing that, you're going to be asking the questions which only market intelligence can answer. So if you're sitting down and you're having a bit of a philosophical discussion around where are we now and where do we want to be, what's happening in our world, are we vulnerable, you know, et cetera, what's happening in our environment, the answer to that can only come from having a look round and you know, tasking somebody to do it and taking some time to do it. Now that might be, as I say, if you've got a strategy person, that might start there, and it might grow out of the strategy side or strategy function, if you like, or, you know, and depending on the size of the business will depend on how, you know, whether that's a person or whether that's a team, or et cetera, et cetera. The other way it might come out of marketing. You know, you might, and this I think has happened in our business in the early days. It actually came, I would say, out of marketing rather than strategy, which is a bit odd, but it did. So obviously, you know, you got marketing communications. That's one thing. But you've also got, and you know, there's product marketing as well, but there's market development, and there is what you might call strategic marketing. You know, thinking about the higher level marketing. So, you know, it's not just the brochures, it's not just the exhibitions, it's not just the PR. You know, that's comms, that's communications. There's bigger questions, and those questions actually start to go back into the strategic world. They start to go back into where are we now, where do we want to be. So that it sort of goes back to the same questions, and therefore the answers can only come from market intelligence. So it might grow that way. But again, the question is that a person, or is that a conversation down the pub? Does it then say, okay, this needs to be a task? How much of a task? Do we outsource it to somebody? Can somebody help us with that? Is there an agency person can help us with that? Do we bring it in-house? Do we employ somebody? Is it a team? And you know, and that's a question that only that's a tailoring question, that and an appropriate question, a question of appropriateness that only the specific business can answer depending on where they are. And I suppose in our world, you know, if I look at where we are now, Manish, myself, three other colleagues, just in market intelligence and secure comms, but then reporting into a bigger team, and then you know, networking on a dotted line basis with another big team in connected intelligence, and then another one in defence and space. And a few years ago, at the Airbus level, at the plane maker level, at the aircraft level, they called a conference for everybody that had market intelligence in their job description, in their title. Manish and I went to it. It was in Toulouse. It was excellent. But I tell you, there was, what was there, Manish? Maybe a couple of hundred people in that.
That's correct, yeah.
You know, so you know, that's the corporate world, but that's not necessarily SmartSat CRC's world. So it's horses for courses.
For sure. Thank you. Great answer. Okay, so it doesn't look like we have any other questions, so we might wrap it up there. I just want to say thank you from SmartSat and the people listening to this webinar, whether it's live or recorded at a later date. So thank you, Steve and Manish, and I'll bid you an early minute. We do have a few minutes up our sleeve, but we won't use that up if we don't need to. So once again, thank you to Airbus for your time in presenting this, and also thank you, Steve and Manish, for your offer to I guess be a point of contact for our ecosystem to reach out to if they need some more information.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, SmartSat CRC, and thanks for the opportunity.
No worries. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.